London, 1215. English barons have risen up against their king, the tyrant John. They wanted liberty for the church and the realm. To achieve this, they marched on London. The citizens opened the gates in support of the cause. Soon after, negotiations began on a Bill of Rights, later known as the Magna Carta or Great Charter. The charter was ratified by King John on June 19, 1215. The people rejoiced. This was the first time that certain rights were guaranteed to the people, and it showed that leaders had to adhere by these rights. The charter lasted only 3 months before John broke his word. This plunged England into civil war. This war drove John out of power, and he died shortly after. The war lasted another year, and 9-year-old Henry III was instituted as king. Although the Magna Carta did not prevent a war from breaking out, it showed that people could make a change. They could make their leaders listen to them. Many fair principles were a part of this document, like, for a trivial offense, a free man shall be fined only in proportion to the degree of his offense, and for a serious offense correspondingly, but not so heavily as to deprive him of his livelihood, showing that people had rights and lawmen had responsibilities to protect these rights. And
Clauses are 39 and 40, which say that nobody should be imprisoned except by lawful judgment, and justice should not be sold or delayed.
later, in 1297, King Edward I reissued the Magna Carta. It ended up becoming the predecessor of many important documents worldwide. The year is 1620. A group of people nicknamed the Pilgrims leave England searching for religious freedom. They boarded a small ship named the Mayflower and left England. The voyage was long and hard. When the Pilgrims finally reached America, they realized that they were hundreds of miles off course. They had no right to the land they had landed on. To solve this, the adult males on board created the Mayflower Compact. This compact gave the Pilgrims the right to settle the land and made a few laws. This compact borrows many terms from the Magna Carta, such as freedom of assembly and a limited government. The Pilgrims settled the land, and many more settlers followed. The famed poet James Russell Lowell once said, "Next to the fugitives whom Moses led out of Egypt, the little shipload of outcasts who landed at Plymouth are destined to influence the future of the world." Plymouth Colony would go on to become Massachusetts and found great cities such as Boston. This movement showed how people could exercise the right to worship freely, and the leaders had no right to interfere. The year is now 1776, almost 160 years after the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth. English citizens are, yet again, rebelling against the crown. Only this time, the rebellion is taking place in one of Britain's most prized possessions, America. The battle cry for the rebels was taxation without representation. The colonists felt that their fundamental rights as Englishmen, which were guaranteed by the Magna Carta, were being violated. They had no vote in the House of Parliament, yet they were taxed highly. Benjamin Franklin said that the refusal of King George to allow the colonies to operate an honest monetary system, which freed the common man from the clutches of money manipulators, was probably the prime cause of the Revolution. The colonists, led by a smart general named George Washington, decided to wage all-out war against Britain. The fighting began in Boston, about 3,000 miles away from London. The Battle of Bunker Hill, although a British victory, proved that the Americans could stand up to Britain. Over the next 6 years, the colonists would fight a very bloody war against the British. This war came to a close on October 19, 1781, when the British General Cornwallis surrendered to George Washington in Yorktown, Virginia. The United States had gained its independence from Britain. Much like Britain, the United States soon found that they needed a constitution. In 1787, with the well-liked General George Washington at the helm, delegates from each state except Rhode Island drafted a constitution. This document, like the Magna Carta and the Mayflower Compact, promised rights that leaders had a responsibility to protect and not interfere with. This constitution created the world's first democracy since ancient Greece. It guaranteed a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. The Constitution went into effect on March 4, 1789, after New Hampshire ratified it. George Washington was elected as the first president of the United States unanimously. About 150 years later, the world was at war. In 1939, the Germans, led by Adolf Hitler, attacked Poland.
Liegt die Zukunft des deutschen Volkes. Wenn wir selbst dieses deutsche Volk
Hitler was a very motivational speaker. His actions plunged the world into the Second World War. Germany allied itself with Japan and Italy. They formed the Axis powers. The forces that opposed them were the Allies, which mainly consisted of the UK, the USSR, France, and the US. After 6 years of brutal fighting, the cruelty of the Nazi regime began to hit the surface. The Allies found one of the biggest genocides ever committed, the Holocaust. Millions of people, mainly Jews, were killed by the Nazis. Hitler was blatantly ignoring many human rights set forth by the Magna Carta, rights that were his responsibility to protect. Hitler committed suicide on April 30th, 1945, and Germany issued an unconditional surrender on May 8th. People around the world declared this VE Day, or Victory in Europe Day.
Throughout the world, throngs of people hailed the end of the war in Europe. It is 5 years and more since Hitler marched into Poland.
Soon after, Japan surrendered and the war was over. The damage caused by the war was immense. An estimated 85 million people died because of the war, the largest amount of lives lost in any event in human history. After the war, people wanted to make sure that this never happened again. To do this, they founded the United Nations. This group was designed to create world peace. The United Nations Charter was signed on June 26, 1945. Soon after, members of the UN began working on a Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It guaranteed many rights guaranteed in the Magna Carta, such as no one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile.
And today, at the threshold of a great event, both in the life of the United Nations and in the life of mankind, this Universal Declaration of Human Rights may well become the international Magna Carta of all men everywhere.
Eleanor Roosevelt, a lead contributor to the movement, called the declaration the International Magna Carta of all men everywhere. After the charter was signed in 1948, most world nations made these rights into law. While some rights, such as racial equality, had to be fought for following the signing of the Declaration, there is no denying its effect on modern society. All of these documents stem from a day in 1215 when the most influential document ever created was made.
It is probably the most important document that sets out a legal basis upon which to act other than the whim of the monarch, King John, in 1215. The relevance of the Magna Carta in the 21st century is it is the foundation of liberty. Some say the foundation of democracy.
Now, as the 800th anniversary of the Magna Carta grows near, its effect on modern rights and responsibilities is only getting stronger.